Let the games begin.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast this week. It is episode 81, which is very hard to believe when I look at the grand scheme of things. It is officially episode 81. Hello, welcome. This is the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian. Like I just mentioned, this is the podcast where we talk about all the latest breaking movie news that has come out throughout the week. I also talk about the movie trailers that came out this week and also talk about the movies that are coming out in theaters this weekend for your viewing pleasures. And of course, in between all that, we'll go on rants and tangents and anything else you can think of. So that is what this podcast is. For all you new listeners or for all you returning listeners, hello, thank you for choosing my little movie podcast out of the dozens and dozens of choices you have of movie podcasts in what is the ether of the internet. So thank you very much for choosing my podcast. So this week it's kind of a lightish, not really news week. We are not going to talk about all the movie news items that came out this week. Mainly for the reason that I have been having a lot of problems today with my mic and with the sound of my computer and just a whole bunch of problems that I don't want to bore you with. So I'm going to keep this podcast relatively short, hopefully, and just talk to you guys about some of the real big noteworthy news items of the week. Obviously, for all you old listeners, you probably already know this, but for all you new listeners, if there is any of you out there, I do run also a Facebook page for the podcast. The Facebook page, a link is down below in the description / show notes area if you want to go check that out. Give that a click and you'll see all the movie news items that we didn't talk about here on the podcast. I do that every week, mostly for pretty much pacing issues or just because I don't have a lot to say about that news item, or in this case, for this week, it's basically because I'm just having some technical issues on my side. That is what this week is all about. So this is just a crazy week, and of course, what a better way to start off the new year by having technical issues on podcast. Of course, this isn't the first podcast of the week. The first podcast of the new year was last week when I had a friend of mine, Tony, on the podcast where we talked about our best movies, worst movies, surprises, and everything in between of 2017. So if you haven't checked that out, I highly recommend you go check that out. I had a lot of fun recording that with Tony. And Tony, if you're listening this week, very much appreciate it for you joining me last week. But I'm back to myself this week. So I'm going to try to have more guests on the podcast this year. I do want this year to be a pretty much a standing statement of what this podcast is going to be and what I've wanted it to be. So hopefully that turns out, but we'll see what happens along the way. So let's just get right to the podcast this week. There was we always start the podcast with trailer talk, and there was a lot of trailers that dropped this week. However, I'm only going to be pinpointing one trailer that came out this week, and that was a new trailer for Red Sparrow. Based on the novel by Jason Matthews, the film follows a ballerina, played by Jennifer Lawrence, who is recruited to the Sparrow School, a Russian intelligence service where she is forced to use her body as a weapon. But her first mission, targeting a CIA agent, played by Joe Edgerton, threatens to unravel the security of both nations. So I've known about this movie for a while, and I'm pretty sure we've talked about the movie on the podcast before. But the trailer itself, this is the first full-length trailer. There was a teaser that came out not too long ago. That was just okay. It didn't give too much of the story, what it was. This really gives you a good sense of what we can expect from the movie, how brutal the movie will be. It's not going to be like a, hey, let's go sit down and watch this movie because it's going to be pretty badass. No, I mean, there's probably going to be badass moments in there. But for the most part, this movie looks like it's going to be very, very hard-hitting and a bit hard to watch at times, probably. I am a huge fan of Joe Edgerton. I'm finally happy to see him get the credit he deserves and be a part of these big projects. Jennifer Lawrence, when given the right material, she's really great. I know there's people out there don't like Jennifer Lawrence for whatever reason they may have, and that's fine. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what she does here. The movie also stars Mary Louise Parker, Charlotte Rampling, and Jeremy Irons. Red Sparrow opens on March 2nd this year. We will definitely talk about Red Sparrow more once we get closer to the release date. So that's the only trailer I wanted to pinpoint and talk about. That was the only trailer that really jumped out to me. There were there was a lot of trailers that dropped this week. One of them was a new trailer for Blockers, the new comedy movie with Leslie Mann, Ike Barinholtz, and
John Cena.
About the three of them trying to stop their teenage daughters from losing their virginity on prom night. So there was a new trailer for the first trailer for Breaking In, which is a Gabrielle Union movie. It's about her playing a mother and having to rescue her two children from her father's home when she goes to visit and sees that it's pretty much basically it's his own little version of Fort Knox, and some burglars come in to try to steal something from the home, and they basically messed with the wrong mother. So that's what that movie's about. There was what else we have? There was a bunch of trailers that dropped this week, so I will put them all down below in the description / show notes area, so you guys can go check those out and enjoy what those movies were. So let's move on to the movie news items of the week. Like I mentioned, I'm recording this on a Friday. Podcast is starting to come out late. Again, I was having a lot of technical issues, so I'm basically just condensing my podcast even more than I already do. So the first movie news item we're going to talk about is something I wasn't going to talk about at first, not because I didn't want to talk about it, just because I just felt that the podcast was already kind of getting a little bloated by the time this movie news item came out. So Mark Wahlberg was paid a hell of a lot more than Michelle Williams in All the Money in the World, the reshoots that happened not too long ago. So for those of you not familiar, All the Money in the World is currently in theaters. It talks about the kidnapping of John Paul Getty III. And of course, the big, controversy around that was when Kevin Spacey got, his allegations against him were made public. Ridley Scott and the producers basically said, well, we're just going to go in and we're going to reshoot everything, and we're going to recast Kevin Spacey as Christopher Plummer. And so that was the first thing. And the other thing was that they were going to keep the release date of December 22nd, although they ended up moving it to December 25th. But that's a whole another thing entirely. But so we're all on the free and clear. Everyone applauded Ridley Scott for doing that, and the producers for doing that, and for making their release dates and everything. However, now there's a new controversy in All the Money in the World, and that is Mark Wahlberg. Because apparently Mark Wahlberg was paid $1.5 million, that's million with an M, for his reshoots, while Michelle Williams was paid less than $1,000 for the reshoots. But it gets crazier, because Wahlberg had a clause in his contract that gave him co-star approval, and apparently would not approve of Christopher Plummer's recasting until his salary demand was met. So the whole story, if you want to read it for yourself and get angry yourself for all of this, is over on USA Today. I'll link the story down below in the description / show notes area, so you guys can go read that and, like I mentioned, get angry at the world for yourself. Now, this is first of all, this is terrible timing, considering that everyone in Hollywood is now on board the equal rights for men and women women and everything, the Me Too movement, the Time's Up movement that's going on. So this is a terrible timing for this to come out. But here's the thing. It's wrong. Believe me, it is completely wrong on every account whatsoever. There is no reason why Mark Wahlberg and Michelle Williams should not be paid equally, because they're both fine actors and actresses, or actors in general. But there was no reason why Mark Wahlberg should be paid $1.5 million to Michelle Williams $1,000, if that. That is crazy. That is absolutely mind-numbingly crazy that even happened. So here's the part of me, though, and believe me, this is wrong. And on every account whatsoever, this is wrong. But as I was thinking of watching the movie, first of all, Michelle Williams, she has a handful of scenes with the character of John Paul Getty, played by Christopher Plummer. The person who has the most scenes with Christopher Plummer in that movie is Mark Wahlberg. So if you look at it that way, if you want to look at it that way, I'm not saying you should look at it that way, but I'm assuming there are people probably looking at it this way. Mark Wahlberg had more scenes with him, so he probably would have to get paid more. But that's not an excuse. It isn't. It's not an excuse at all. I know I brought it up, but it's not an excuse. Especially considering, seriously, $1.5 to like $1,000? That is absolutely crazy. So there's a lot more to the story. Apparently there was there were no reshoot clause on either one of Williams or Wahlberg's contracts, so they came back anyway. And the other thing is that both of these actors, Mark Wahlberg and Michelle Williams, they are both represented by the same casting firm, or by the same agent firm. So they're in the same agency. They have different agents, obviously, but the fact that they would even allow, I don't know, it's frustrating. It's frustrating and unbelievable, yet not too unbelievable that this is actually happening, because it's Hollywood. But yeah, so there you go. There's another reason to get angry at Hollywood is because of this. So I just wanted to mention it because I know if I didn't mention it, I'd probably get yelled at. But I was going to mention it either way, but I was going to save it for a lot later. But again, everything just kind of got ballooned up in the timing of all this. So there you go. I wanted to mention that part. So let's move on to the next movie news item. And by the way, that was the only non-comic book movie news item I have on the outline, because all the other movie news items, I realized this after I had trimmed down the outline for the podcast. All of them are comic book movie related. So I finally earned my nerdy badge for the podcast. I always try to break it up. I try not to get too comic booky. But this was just a big week for comic book movie news, apparently. So yeah, let's dive right into it. Vin Diesel is in talks to lead Sony Pictures' new comic book adaptation of Bloodshot. Now, Vin Diesel obviously already has a franchise, two franchises if you think about it, with Fast and the Furious and Guardians of the Galaxy, but he's about to maybe add another one. Diesel is in talks with Sony Pictures for Bloodshot. The property is based off a Valiant comic, which Sony announced back in 2015 that they will be doing adaptations of Valiant comic properties like Bloodshot and Harbinger, with a plan to do a crossover universe and essentially do two movies of each, two Harbinger movies, two Bloodshot movies, and then have a final fifth movie with both worlds colliding. Now, Bloodshot, for those of you unfamiliar, centers on a mob killer who enters a witness protection program. When he's betrayed by a handler, he becomes part of a secret experiment to create the ultimate killing machine. His memories are erased, and he is injected with nanites, which turn him into an unstoppable force. With his new strength to spare, he tries to rediscover who he is while battling both the mob and the police. The plan, at least according to the report, is to create a rated-R comic adaptation that will be, quote, tonally and aesthetically influenced by high-concept sci-fi blockbusters of the late 80s, with films like RoboCop, Terminator, and Total Recall were name-dropped in that report. There is no word yet on when they will start filming, but Diesel does have some free time, since Fast and the Furious 9 has been pushed back from 2020 in favor of doing the Hobbs-Shaw spin-off, which comes out next year. So this is we've talked about Bloodshot on the podcast before. Also, last summer, Jared Leto was in talks for the film, but it looks like talks fell through, obviously, since Diesel is now eyed for the project. So there is that to take into consideration. So there you go. Let's move on to the next movie news item. Gambit loses its director Gore Verbinski. Now, we can add Gambit to the superhero movies that can't keep or have a director at all. As reports say that Gore Verbinski, who of course has directed the first 3 Pirates of the Caribbean movies, he directed The Ring, he directed Rango, The Lone Ranger, he directed A Cure for Wellness, came out last year. He has dropped out of Fox's long-gestured solo Gambit movie, which of course was going to be a X-Men spinoff. The movie still has Channing Tatum attached to star and produce, but the movie has taken another hit by making it hard to think that this movie will ever happen. So we don't know what the hell's going on over there. So Verbinski joins the list of directors that were attached that dropped out, like Rupert Wyatt, who directed Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and Doug Liman, who was attached for a while, but they all dropped out. Now, according to Deadline, the split was not due to creative differences, but to scheduling issues. Verbinski was full on board with the project. He was even location scouting to start filming the movie in March, but that now is out the window. The movie was obviously doing location scouting. They were also in the casting phase of it all. Lizzie Kaplan was in early talks to join the project a few months ago, or a handful of months ago. But yeah, and everything was going well. They were doing that. They even had a release date for the movie. It was going to come out on February 14th next year, 2019. And of course, that was after they had pulled the movie from the release schedule entirely. But now Fox has lost its director. They even gave it a new release date after losing Gore Verbinski, or when they had Gore Verbinski, I assume. Gambit will now be released on June 7th of 2019. So we don't know if they're still going to make that release date. Maybe they can find a director in the next month or so to start filming in March, if they want to keep doing that, and we'll see what happens. I don't know. Gambit's been in the works since 2014, in case you want some perspective on that. I don't know. I honestly don't know. The fact that they can't keep a director attached has me a little worried. And then I assume that Fox probably wants to get out the Gambit movie before the property goes to Disney. Of course, the Fox-Disney merger is still a go at this point. But we'll see what happens with that. I'm slightly yet okay with all this. I wasn't a huge fan of Channing Tatum at first. I do think he's a pretty great actor, and how I've done a really big turnaround on Channing Tatum. But I don't know about him as Gambit. Let's put it that way. So we'll see how all this works out. But yeah, Gambit loses another director. So we'll see if they keep that June 7th, 2019 release date intact. And we're going to stick with Fox a little bit with the next few news items. A couple news items, I should say. So the next movie news item we're going to talk about is another movie that's being developed at the moment. Although this doesn't have official director just yet. Tim Miller, the director of Deadpool, is developing a solo Kitty Pryde movie. Yes, you heard me. He is developing a solo Kitty Pryde, aka Shadowcat, movie. Now, Collider got the exclusive word that Tim Miller, like I mentioned, the director of Deadpool, is developing a solo movie based off the X-Men character Kitty Pryde, aka Shadowcat. Now, she is the mutant with the ability to phase through solid objects, and also other abilities as well from the comics. But that's kind of the main thing that we all know. Now, before everyone starts questioning the states of 20th Century Fox for making, quote-unquote, another X-Men property, considering the Disney merger that I teased a little bit earlier, the movie is only in development. That is in no way saying this movie is going to happen. And even then, if Tim Miller can somehow get a script together, get a cast together, get a director, and film this movie within a short gap of a year, because that's how long the official merger of Disney and Fox will take, 12 to 18 months to officially be a real thing, Fox can do whatever they want. And they're not just going to sit around and be like, we're just going to wait. We're not going to do anything. No, they're not going to do that. Why would they do that? And again, it's only in development. I will repeat this until you make a game of it. It is only in development. They are not officially making a Kitty Pryde solo movie. It is only in development. It's not officially, it doesn't have a green light yet, unless next week or in a couple weeks we hear official word of it. Until then, it is only in development. It's not in the works, it's in development. Not only that, Tim Miller is currently attached to other projects. He's producing the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. He will be directing the new Terminator movie with James Cameron for a 2019 release, so they're probably going to start filming that sometime this year, so he's going to be busy doing that. Also, Miller could just get the ball rolling and hand off the project to someone else, again, assuming that Fox likes the pitch enough, and they're like, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do it. So again, it's only in development. I don't want to stress that more than I have to. It's only in development. We may not even see it happen, and even if it does happen, we'll bring up the discussion at that point. Do we really need a Shadow Cat / Kitty Pryde movie? A solo Kitty Pryde movie. Yes, she has some very interesting arcs in the comics, and she has some cool stuff that happens to her and to the people surrounding her, but is she enough for her own lead movie? She probably deserves a movie more than Multiple Man that's in the works with James Franco. I said James Cameron. James Franco, who's going to play Multiple Man. I think I'd prefer to see a Shadow Cat movie over Multiple Man, but that's just me. I don't know. We'll see. So, it's only in development. Settle down. Don't go crazy with saying they're all stupid over there at Fox. Relax. And speaking of Fox, like I mentioned, we're going to stick with Fox for a little bit. I think this is the last Fox news item. Yes, it is. Fox has pushed back and delayed the release date of New Mutants, but they've also pushed up the release date of Deadpool 2. So Fox has, like I mentioned, has dropped a ton of tidbits of news this week that all revolve around their Marvel properties. We'll talk about the good one first. Obviously, Deadpool 2, they've pushed it up. The release date, the Untitled sequel, was originally going to come out on June 1st. It will now come out on May 19th, or 18th. I'm all messed up now. May 18th. Deadpool 2 is coming out on May 18th. That is a new release date for the movie. And it's a rather interesting move. But I think maybe one that Fox sees necessary. Because Deadpool 2, its original release date on June 1st, had the week to itself, which would have been great. It would have probably made a lot of money that week. But it also would be coming out a week after Solo, A Star Wars Story. Now, it doesn't matter how bad Solo is. If it does turn out to be bad, it's still a Star Wars movie. Those movies make a lot of money. So they probably don't want to, compete against Disney and Star Wars. So there is that. Now the other thing with its new release date on May 18th, Deadpool 2 will now be going up against the horror film Slender Man, which is probably a little bit too late. The first trailer did come out last week. We didn't talk about it on the podcast last week because I kind of devoted it all to the year in review of 2017. So the trailer is out if you want to go watch it. It's okay, I guess. I don't know how people are going to react to the movie. I think I don't know if people are going to think that it's connected to the two little girls that pulled their friend out to the middle of the woods and stabbed her. That tragic news story that came out, I believe a couple years ago now. Was it last year? I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago, but it was recent, obviously. But I don't know if people are going to connect it to that, but there is that. So Deadpool 2 will be coming out and be facing Slender Man at the box office. So there you go. There is that. The other tidbit of news, which is the bummer news for me, because I'm looking forward to this, is the New Mutants. This was set to come out on April 13th of this year. It has now been pushed back and delayed 10 months. So the new release date for the New Mutants will be February 22nd, 2019. Now, this is a bummer for a lot of reasons. I was really looking forward to watching this year. The New Mutants was actually one of my most anticipated movies of the year. So there was no reasoning for the move at first, there were some people speculating that maybe Fox didn't want two movies at the box office competing against each other overseas. There was talks. There was or not talks, but there was again speculation of all this. This is all speculation. Speculation that maybe the Fox Disney merger has something to do with it, or whatever. There was a lot of speculation. It was all speculation. There was no confirmed reports until today. The two different outlets, the Wrap and the Tracking Board. So the reason for the move was to make the movie scarier, because the New Mutants is taking the horror genre and adding it to the superhero genre, which one of the reasons why I'm really excited for it. Now the Tracking Board reported this, saying, quote, "Word on the street is that after the film tested well, but not great, the studio decided to actually embrace the film's horror elements and beef up the scares in the wake of the successes of It and Get Out last year." End quote. That said, even though I'm bummed out about this, because I was really looking forward to it, I think rallying up the scares is pretty cool. And if they're going to do that, then I'm all in for it. It was good to hear that it tested well. I mean, obviously it didn't test great. Maybe the scares didn't work or whatever. Test audiences are usually a very fickle thing, because those are very kind of, the test audiences can really make or break a movie sometimes. So we'll have to decide on that. But it's good to hear that the New Mutants was testing well. Again, not great, but well. We don't know if one of the, maybe one of those elements was the horror elements. Maybe people wanted it to go full on horror, and now they're going to do that. If this is the case, I can see why they would delay the movie this long. It probably takes a while for everyone to come back. You have Anya Taylor-Joy. She is filming Glass, the sequel to Split, and Unbreakable. You have one of the Stranger Things kids in there, so he's probably off filming the new season there. So it's you have time to think of all the scares and bring all these people back and reshoot a lot of stuff, probably is what they're going to do, or add some new scenes. So that being said, I'm bummed out, but again, if they're going to make it more scarier and fully embrace the horror genre, then I'm all for the delay, and hopefully it becomes worth it and ends up being worth it. So New Mutants, the new release date is February 22nd next year. Deadpool 2 will be coming out on May 18th this year. So yeah. Alright, so let's move on to the final news item of the week, and it's a pretty big one. It's Marvel has hired a writer for the long-gestured and overdue, that's my phrasing, Black Widow movie. So that's right, folks. After years of talks, it finally looks like we are one step closer to an actual solo Black Widow movie. Variety reports that Marvel Studios has hired Jack Schaefer, the writer-director of a movie called Timer, to pen the script. The report does note that the film is still in the very early development stage and hasn't got a green light, so it'll probably be a while before we actually see it on the big screen, if ever. So we'll see what happens with that. The outlet went on to say that Marvel president Kevin Feige met with a number of potential screenwriters before deciding on Schaefer. Feige even consulted Scarlett Johansson to see what she wanted from the writer and from the movie itself. Now, obviously, Black Widow has been a part of the cinematic universe, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, since Iron Man 2. That was all the way back in 2010? Maybe? 2010? 2014. Sorry, 2014. No, not 2014. 2010. Yeah, there you go, 2010. I knew I had it written down right here in my outline. So 2010, and there was obviously a lot of talks of getting your own movie for this long, and Feige has talked about it, and fans have wanted it, and like I mentioned, it's long gestured and long overdue, and it looks like it's finally one step closer to actually happening. As for Schaefer herself, she made her filmmaking debut with Timer, which was an offbeat sci-fi romantic comedy. And by the way, Timer, if you want to go check it out, Timer, it's spelled Timer, but all of it's capitalized except the I. The I is lowercase. So there you go. So she's after that, she's kind of been stuck behind the scenes writing scripts for movies that are either in development or going to get made. She wrote a 2014 Blacklist script called The Shower, which was a sci-fi action comedy about an alien invasion that happens during a baby shower that Anne Hathaway is attached to produce and star in. She also wrote the MGM female-focused reboot of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels called Nasty Women with Anne Hathaway and Rebel Wilson. And finally, she wrote the Disney Frozen short that everyone now hates, Olaf's Frozen Adventure, that of course was played in front of Coco before people complained that it was too long and took it out of theaters. So now you can just watch Coco in theaters and not have to worry about sitting down for like a 15-20 minute Frozen short that people didn't like because it was too long, or because people don't like Frozen. I'm not quite sure what the hate came from, where the hate drew from, but I think because it was too long. I think that was it. Anyway, so there you go. On one hand, this is great. It's finally happening. Like I mentioned, it's long overdue. It was long gestured. On the other hand, like I mentioned, Iron Man 2 came out all the way back in 2010. And Black Widow has appeared in pretty much every big movie so far, like the Avengers movies, the last 2 Captain America movies, and she will, of course, appear in Avengers Infinity War, and we can assume probably Avengers 4. However, that said, Marvel could also be just trying to keep Scarlett Johansson around, because like her and many others of part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe so far, her contract is probably going to be up soon, and this could be a way of Marvel saying, hey, before you leave, we're finally going to give you your own movie. So we don't know what's going to happen with that. We don't know even when the movie's going to be, what the movie's going to be about. Obviously, there's no word on that. It's, again, still in the early development stage. It could be an origin story. It can be a movie that takes place between a few other movies. Maybe they'll talk. Maybe Hawkeye will make an appearance. We know that they have a history, went on a few missions. Maybe he'll make an appearance there. Maybe it'll take place between. I don't know if it was like a rumor or if it was just someone speculating, or just someone just saying, hey, this would be kind of a cool idea, that the movie would take place between Civil War and Infinity War, which I don't know if that would make a lot of sense because the movie will come out after Infinity War, but whatever. So we don't know what the movie will be about, what it will focus on, besides, of course, Black Widow, but we'll see. Like I mentioned, I think it's great that she's finally getting her own movie. I think it's long overdue. The fact that she's been in the universe for so long and she hasn't gotten her own movie is kind of shocking to me and to a lot of other people. But Johansson seems to be game for it. So if that is the case, great. Finally, give it to her. Jeez, why'd it take so long? So yeah, there you go. So there is that. Alright, so that's all the movie news that came out this week that I talked about on the podcast. Like I mentioned, I do run a Facebook page for movie news, so there'll be a few movie news items that will be up there. Either I'm writing them at the moment, or they'll be up by the time this podcast goes up. Leonardo DiCaprio has joined the new Quentin Tarantino movie. There is that you can look forward to be reading. What else? Natalie Portman is in talks to join Noah Hawley's directorial feature film called Pale Blue Dot. She's replacing Reese Witherspoon in that. What else am I going to talk about? Or what else am I writing down? Some other stuff up there. I can't remember all of it, but there's going to be some movie news items that we didn't get to talk about on the podcast that will be up on the Facebook page. So if you want to go check that out, I highly recommend you do. And while you're over there, you might as well just give me a like. You can be all caught up on all the movie news comes out throughout the week, basically giving you an early preview of what we're going to talk about the podcast. But like I mentioned, we don't always talk about all the movie news items here on the podcast, so I leave them up there on the Facebook page so you guys can be well informed of your movie news week. All right. That being said, with that little mini plug on my Facebook page, let's move on to this week's releases.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Alright, so this week's releases, we have some expansion releases coming out this week. The first one is Hostiles. That is a new movie by Scott Cooper, who directed Black Mass and what was the other movie? I had it in my head. I totally forgot what it was now. I'm going to beat myself up for that one. Crazy Horse. There you go. So I knew it was up there. I knew it was Out of the Furnace was the other one I was thinking about too. So Scott Cooper, he is the director of the movie. It stars Christian Bale. He plays a reluctant army general or army captain who has to take a Indian chief or Native American chief, to I forgot where he was supposed to be taking him, but he's supposed to be taking him somewhere, and they're going obviously through the dangerous western frontier, where they of course meet a lot of hostility throughout. It looks like there's another Native American attack. Rosamund Pike is in there. She's playing a widower. It looks like Jesse Plemons is in there as well. Stephen Lang, Ben Foster. So it's going to be packed with names you know and recognize. I hear some good things about it. I hear some mixed things about it. I am thoroughly looking forward to this. So there is Hostiles. The other expansion released this week is the new Steven Spielberg film, The Post, with of course Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep and Bob Odenkirk and Carrie Coon and just a bunch of other people. Sarah Paulson's in there as well. It's jam packed to the gills. This cast. So The Post is coming out. I'm actually going to go see this tonight. So I'm looking forward to that. So that is the new movie, of course, about the Washington Post and the New York Times and their fight against the government and the White House for publishing the Pentagon Papers. So very timely in some regard as well. So there you go. So there is that. Let's move on. There's no real big limited releases coming out this week, at least none that I saw. Of course, I can always miss something, so that is the case. I am sorry. So we're just going to jump right to the wide releases of the week. The first wide release of the week is Proud Mary. Taraji P. Henson plays Mary, a hit woman working for an organized crime family in Boston. Her life is completely turned around when she meets a young boy whose path she crosses when a professional hit goes awry. So that's your first wide release. The next wide release is The Commuter, reuniting director Hamed Khaled Serra and Liam Neeson, having done films like Unknown, Nonstop, and Run All Night. Together, The Commuter follows a businessman who is caught up in a criminal conspiracy during his daily commute. The Commuter also stars Vera Farmiga, Patrick Wilson, and Sam Neill. He's nowhere in the trailers, so it should be interesting to kind of see where he pops up there. But the last wide release this week is Paddington 2. Paddington was a surprise and smash hit back in 2014, so a sequel was definitely going to happen. Now the sequel follows Paddington, voiced once again by Ben Whishaw. Never know how to say his last name. He was Q in the last two James Bond movies, who is happily settled with the Brown family and a popular member of the local community. Paddington picks up a series of odd jobs to buy the perfect present for his Aunt Lucy's 100th birthday, only for the gift to be stolen and the blame put on him. So those are your wide releases. Paddington 2, The Commuter, and Proud Mary. Your expansion releases are Hostiles and The Post. Like I mentioned, I'm going to go see The Post tonight. Looking forward to that. I'm hopefully going to go see Hostiles either, if not this weekend, definitely during the week next week. I am definitely going to go watch The Commuter because it's Liam Neeson, and I'm never not going to watch a Liam Neeson movie. So, what do you want from me? It's him beating up people on a train. Why not? So there's that. Proud Mary. I was a little hesitant about Proud Mary, but I'm going to go watch it because... why not? It's an action movie. I like action movies. So there's that. And Paddington 2, I have not seen the first Paddington. I actually do plan on watching Paddington sometime during the weekend after I go watch The Commuter and The Post and Proud Mary. So I can watch Paddington 2 either next week or during the week as well. Because I heard good things about Paddington, and I've always wanted to watch it, and for whatever reason, I've never watched it. So I hope that I can watch it sometime during the week or this weekend and go watch Paddington 2, because it looks fun. It looks like a nice family movie. And who says you need a family to go watch a family movie? Or somebody, I'm lonely. What? No. Anyway, I gotta make myself laugh. So that's it, guys. That's the podcast for you guys. So again, wide releases this week: Paddington 2, The Commuter, and Proud Mary. Your expansion releases of the week are Hostiles and The Post. By the way, if you don't see Hostiles in your theaters this weekend, it could be just because it's it's doing this weird rollout. It came out limited release last week. It's coming out quote unquote wide this week. But if it doesn't pop up in your theaters this week, it's probably going to pop up next week. So just be aware of hostiles. January is a weird month where limited releases at the end of December or the beginning of January get these weird rollout dates in theaters and all these places. So be aware of that. After January, all the wide releases will be wide releases from this point forward. So yeah, there you go. That's it, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. I already did a little plug of my Facebook page, so if you want to go check that out. Also, while you're already down there in the description/show notes area, I have some other links for you guys. My WordPress account, where I do spoiler-free written reviews for the movies that I watch. That's down there as well. I'm going to be doing a lot more with that page besides written reviews and the monthly preview post that I do at the beginning of every month. I'm doing a lot more there as well this year. I'm going to get back into the writing habit of mine. So go ahead and subscribe to that. I got my personal Instagram and Twitter handle down there. I have a Twitter page for the podcast. That's Movie Pit Podcast. That's at Movie Pit Podcast. So there is that. If you want to go check that out, I highly recommend you go check that out. But yeah, there is that. What else is down there? All the links to the trailers, like I mentioned, the link to the USA Today story about Mark Wahlberg's pay over Michelle Williams' pay. What else? I can't think of anything else that's down there. All the links, if you're listening to this on YouTube, thank you very much. But if YouTube maybe is too inconvenient for you to listen, you can go and check out the podcast on iTunes if you're an iPhone user. So if you're an iPhone user, go to that podcast app and just click the link that's down there and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Leave me a rating and review. I'd really appreciate it. It helps out the podcast in the long run. Also helps me out to know that you guys are liking what you're seeing. And if you go like and subscribe and follow and everything else, I'd really appreciate it because it just gives me the idea that you guys are liking what I'm putting out. I know one person podcast can get dull and bland sometimes, and I probably shouldn't be saying that out loud, but that's the kind of person that I am. I'm going to be honest with you. So, but I really appreciate if you guys go do all that. And I'd really appreciate it, and I really love you guys forever. So yeah. And also, if you leave a rating and review on the podcast, I'm gonna read it on the podcast, so you get to hear your name on the podcast in the ether of the internet. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, that's it. That's all I got for you guys this week. Thank you guys so much. Like I mentioned, I try to make. I think this will probably be one of the shortest podcasts I've ever done, because again, just all these technical problems and stuff like that, and wanting to condense the podcast and wanting to get it out as soon as possible for you guys. So yeah, that's it. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. I'm talking too fast now. I'm spitting all over the place. Probably don't want to know that. But yeah, that's all I got. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. Go check out all the links down below in the description/show notes area. And that's it. Have a good, safe, fun weekend. Be safe out there. If it's cold in the area, keep warm. I know it's cold over here in my area. Oh man, it's cold. But I'm used to it by now. So yeah, thank you guys so much and appreciate it. And as always, go watch some movies.
Whoop whoop! Yeah! Give it up! Movies!